I'm very happy that we have Dwayne Stovall with us this evening. His new organization is Keep Texas Free. It's to educate Texans about federalism and nationalism and basically how voters are manipulated and how our principles and values are used against us. I think you're going to find it extremely interesting. You're going to hear a lot of things you probably haven't heard before. He was his candidate for the U.S. Senate, and unfortunately he didn't win, and we have our rhino John Cornyn. But the fact is that I hope he runs again. He's a small businessman from Cleveland, Texas, and I'm going to have him come up here and we'll get started. If you'll give him a hand.
Thank you very much. Is it working? Can you hear me? Does it work? Does it work at all? Oh, here.
Close enough. Just, there you go.
How about now?
Turn the other one off. Turn the light.
Is that all right?
Yeah.
Oh, all right. Yes, I'm just a small businessman from Cleveland, Texas. I'm not really from Cleveland, Texas. For those of you who don't know, my wife and I are from New London. So I like coming up here to see everybody. My in-laws are still in New London. About the U.S. Senate race. That race is why I'm in front of you today. Everything I learned over the last year and a half has kind of brought me to this point. I'm very, very proud today. I was not this proud the day after the primary. I'm not much on losing anything, but it happened. But now that I've had a chance to kind of digest everything and sat on it and thought about it, the fact is we took about 11% of the state of Texas with $70,000. That's unheard of. I'm telling you right now, that statistic alone just shocks me every day. I'm so proud of that, I can't tell you how proud I am of that. That said, we have what we have. And there's some really basic understanding that I have developed over the last 8 years that I've recently found out that almost no one understands. And I trust me, 10 years ago, I had no clue about what I'm talking about today. And I'm going to get into some things that are going to rub you wrong, very wrong. There are a few of you in here who have been to some other events or presentations, and you've heard me talk already. So don't cheat, don't jump in here and help everybody out. Mary Lou could get up here and tell you what I'm about to say verbatim. I could just leave and she could do it. But Keep Texas Free is an initiative that came out of what I learned over the year. The idea is I need to get around the state and get as many people as I can, many Texans, because I'm very much, everybody heard me, I was put Texas first. This is very much about Texas. So I need to get this out there. This is education-based. I hate to say it's a seminar because that kind of makes it sound like it should be run by an academic, and I'm not an academic. I didn't finish college. What I know today, I started picking up about 8 years ago. I was in my 40s. When I picked it up, I went to source documents. I wanted to know about the Constitution. I went to Philadelphia. I read the debates. I went to the state ratification debates, and I just wanted to know, what did that document provide for us? And what I found out was that what it provided, we don't live under today. Not even a semblance of it. And there's some things that we all in this room, bar just a few, all of us in this room believe a few things that are absolutely wrong. And you can be mad at me at the beginning. I guarantee you'll agree with me at the end. Keep Texas Free. We've got a t-shirt. Everybody loves Don't Tread on Me. Everybody's got Don't Tread on Me stuff. Come and take it. Don't tread on me, all that stuff. We don't have that. We have this. You've been tread on. Now what? Because the reality is, for about 100 years, they've had a boot on our neck. It's just a fact. We're getting stomped on every single day, and we're still walking around pretending like we've got some ounce of freedom that we can fight over. The issue is that government is so large, it's just kicking our tails regularly. We have t-shirts that are going to come out with this, but right now we're still trying to find a logo for the bigger picture here. And on your cards, those cards you see on the seats, there's a website on it that says Keep My State Free. That's no good. It was too fluffy. It was too nice. So there's going to be an overarching website that's going to be a gathering point for any other state that wants to come get involved with this. It's basically pushing federalism as the framers designed it. And the new website is going to be called Get Off My State. So we're going to try and put a little edge to it, give everybody a place to come, learn a little bit more about what the framers intended, and show how far off track we really are and how we got there. So when we get the logo made, and anybody who's very artistic, find the email on there and email me if you want to design a Get Off My State logo. We're looking at everybody's. Simply put, which is more powerful, the state government or the federal government? Supposed to be the states, correct. I think we can all agree that's pretty much not what we have today. I'm afraid I'm going to be barking in everybody's ear. How's that? The Constitution was created, it created a government based in three principles: federalism, republicanism, and limited government. Now, you'll see I have federalism highlighted here. The reason I have it highlighted is because it is the most important, but I'm going to explain to you real quick what the others are. Limited government, very simple. If you understand liberty, freedom, limited government can be interchanged with the word liberty. Basically, there has never been a government that got so large that the people were so much more free. The historical formula is smaller government, more free the people. Larger the government, the more oppressed the people. Republicanism is a pretty simple concept. That's the idea that we're going to be represented by those we elect. And the way the framers set it up was it was going to be those we elect who were most close in proximity to us. If you read your Constitution, it still has the original formula of 30,000 citizens per representative. The reason that was in there, and they argued over whether it should be higher or lower, the reason that was in there was because if you lived in a community of 30,000 people, there was a very high likelihood that you would either know the person you were voting for, or you would know someone who knew the person you were voting for, and you would have context of character. Remember that character thing? The thing we don't have anymore? You can't get context of character when there's 720,000 of us to one representative. And that's what we have today. 720,000 plus to one person. So who goes to church with them? Who sees them at Walmart or the grocery store or any store? Who knows anything about them or the people that sit on boards with them or who live next door to them? Nobody. There's very little context of character. What do we get? We get $10 million worth of marketing sent to us to say, I'm conservative just like you. And that's what we get. And we wonder why we keep electing the same people over and over again. Well, we are sheep. In Federalist 45, James Madison, and by the way, James Madison, who's regularly recognized as the father of the Constitution, was a big government guy. I like James Madison. I have Jeffersonian principles. James Madison, I respect him. He had principles too. He was a big government guy. Most of the stuff he brought up in Philadelphia got shot down, but he was very, very wise. Beyond his years, by the way. Most of everything he wrote was before he was 30. Very, very smart guy. The powers delegated by the proposed Constitution to the federal government are few and defined. Those which are to remain in the state governments are numerous and indefinite. That's what he wrote during the state ratification debates. This is what the states agreed to. This is what they agreed to. Small general government, infinite powers in the state government. Remember the Declaration of Independence? We are and just should be free and independent states. Independent states with a capital S. Like if you were talking about the state and you were standing in Germany, you'd be talking about the German government or the German state. When you're in Texas, it's a capital S. When we talk about, you hear me say the nation, I'm talking about Texas. Federal government was never intended to be involved in the affairs of the states beyond those limited authorities for which it was delegated. Never. Never. Never intended to be there. If we have enumerated powers, they're supposed to be restricted to that, but they're not. Everybody understands the 10th Amendment? We all like to say we support the 10th Amendment. In a nutshell, the 10th Amendment says anything not delegated in that Constitution belongs to the states. I always draw everybody's attention to the states respectively or to the people. You have to understand the context of that is if we live inside the borders of Texas, the people that live inside the borders of it, we reside in Texas, we are the state. The people that live inside the Louisiana borders, they're Louisiana. The states and the people are interchangeable. That's the same thing. You've heard me say it, federalism is history. It's been destroyed. It's been replaced. What's it been replaced with? Nationalism. You're cheating. Today we have an unconstitutional government based in nationalism with unlimited powers. Is there anybody in here who would argue that this government can do anything it wants, anytime it wants, any day it wants, and there's nothing we can do about it? Anything. If you were Alexander Hamilton, this is the viewpoint. Nationalism is when all power is held by the central government, with the states being utilized as subordinate administrators. Now, I wrote that because, that's my words, subordinate administrators. I want everybody to think about that. Do we live in the United States of America in the free and independent state of Texas? Or do we live in the United States, singular, of America in the county of Texas? Think about that. Let that soak in for a minute. We live in the county of Texas. In Texas, in the 82nd legislature, which was the one prior, not the last one, but the one before, which we have final numbers on, we took in somewhere around $82 billion in the state of Texas in taxes. That's what we all paid into the kitty. What did we spend? It's a biennial budget every other year, remember? We took in around a little over $82 billion. We spent over $190 billion. Now, how does that happen? You know, I can't do that. It comes back from the federal government, and it's dangled back to the states. And they say, oh, well, you know, they take a huge fuel tax from us, which is supposed to be dedicated to highway funds. They take our taxes out of our paychecks before we ever get it. They take their money before we ever see it, right? And then they turn around, they dangle it back to the state, and they say, here you go. Here's a little bit of money for education, but oh, wait a minute. Can't feed your kid fried chicken at school at lunch. And they go, oh, wait a minute. This is going to be your water pressure at your shower head. And oh, wait a minute. This is your light bulb you're going to choose from. And oh, wait a minute. What are you saying? You want to pray at a football game? I don't know about that. That's how this all starts and works. We are not free and independent. We don't manage our own affairs in any way, shape, or form. Our state legislators, and I wish some of them were here because I love getting into this with these guys, they go with the good intentions, but the fact is status quo has been in control for 50 years in the state legislature in Texas. And they go there and they behave exactly like the U.S. Congress. And the reason we get up on, we get on TV and you say, Texas is open for business. We're creating more jobs than anybody else in the union. Half of them go to illegals, but we're creating more of them than anybody else. Well, that's true. We're the best of the worst. Every single state in the union is failing financially. I told these guys earlier, I'm a data guy. Something your state legislator will never tell you. David Simpson would tell you. And if you asked him if this is true, he would tell you yes. In the last 10 years in Texas, our population has grown by about 20%, maybe a little more, a little over 20. In that same 10-year period, our debt has grown over 150%. So when they say, well, we got to spend more, we got all this population influx. Oh, really? Really? 20% increase in population, 150% increase in debt? I don't think so. By the way, of the debt in Texas, the debt that does not include unfunded liabilities and such, it's just hard debt, is around 40 billion plus and climbing pretty fast. About 75% of that, give or take a little bit, belongs to municipalities and school districts. All these bonds we're passing around the state, they're eating our sack lunch. We're getting these 20 and 30-year bonds for $500 million at a time. And what are they doing? They're banking on money that they don't have, on a government that's broke, and they're figuring that they're just going to roll the dice, and we'll just do it now because we'll be dead and gone by the time it hits the fan. And folks, I want to live long enough that we get this thing straightened out one way or another. This is not going in a good direction. Nationalize is when you put all the power in the central, which is what we've done. Thomas Jefferson, who's my favorite, He was not perfect. None of these men were perfect, by the way. And don't hold up the framers like they were, the founders and the framers like they were gods. They weren't. They were just men, and they had issues, but very principled individuals generally. Thomas Jefferson was not in Philadelphia. He was not at the state ratification debates. He was not at the first Congress when they wrote the Bill of Rights. He read the Constitution after it was implemented some years later, and this is what he wrote. He said, the Constitution on this hypothesis is a mere thing of wax in the hands of the judiciary, which they may twist and shape in any form they please. And that's exactly what's happened. Now, this is where it'll get a little different for you. I know in my heart why we're failing, because we are failing. I know in my heart why we're failing, and I lay it 99% on the feet of the judges in Washington. Now, we could sit here and blame the Congress all day long because they hold responsibility for not performing their duties with the powers that they have. Everybody understands, we're taught in school that we have, and you tell me if you've heard different, 3 co-equal branches of government, correct? Okay, that's a lie. It's not 3 co-equal branches. One branch has most of the power, the Congress. The legislative branch has most of the power. In that Congress, it's bicameral, it's supposed to be. Lower house represents the people, right? People's house, that's why it's got so many more people in it. 435, which, by the way, the reason we don't have representation like we had when the framers instituted the 30,000 per representative was because around 1915, that great period in 1913 to 1925, the sitting Congress decided that there was going to be a huge influx in population numbers and it would have changed. You know, in Texas, we know something about redistricting, right? Well, they were going to have a bit of a redistricting at the congressional level. They could only amend their numbers based on incoming states and changes in population or 10-year census. So they decided, well, there's 435 of us, that's plenty, because a number of them were going to face challengers or possibly get out of their warm market and maybe lose their seat. So they just changed the rules and made themselves 435. And then a few years later, I think it was 1926 or 7, they permanently made it the way it is today. And your elitists were off and running. Anyway, the lower house is the people's house. The upper house was supposed to represent the states, and it's supposed to be a check by the states on the federal. In the Congress, the lower house is the most powerful body in government. The House of Representatives can declare war, they can tax you, they can impeach anybody in government, they write law. They're the powerhouse. They don't do anything these days except stand up, beat their chest, and wonder why we're not traveling around the world doing some more good. The Commerce Clause. There are 3 aspects of the federal judiciary that has completely destroyed the framers' design of this Constitution. Now, I'm going to give you the 3. These are my viewpoint, okay? This is a layman's viewpoint. We're all going to go to law school tonight. Any lawyers in the room? Not a single one? Nobody's going to be arguing with me? Okay. The Commerce Clause is the first one. The Commerce Clause is pretty simple. The way it's written, the way it was designed, and its intent, and I hate using the word intent because it is what it is. They gave the general government the authority to regulate commerce between the states and keep it regular. To some degree, it was to keep commerce between the states regular. It was absolutely not designed for them to regulate all commerce inside your state, which is exactly what they do today. They regulate every single thing we do all day, every day. Totally outside their bounds. Second thing is the 17th Amendment. Y'all probably all know what that is, right? 17th Amendment, the U.S. senators were originally appointed by their state legislators to be the check. George Mason wanted a check on that new government for the states, and he gave them the Senate. 1913, they came along and they passed the 17th Amendment, and they made the U.S. senators popularly elected. What did that do to the whole system of government? Nobody ever talks about this. I never had a teacher talk about this. This is what I view. It took the bicameral system, which was the people represented and the states represented, and it merged them. So we act like there's a lower house and an upper house, but there's really not. There's really 435, a group of 435 parliament that's all popularly elected, and the only difference is differing terms. And if you look at their behavior for the last century, it's identical. I mean, there's some spots in there where they argue back and forth, and we sound like there's a big argument between this and that or whatever, but basically they work together to do one thing. And what is that? Grow the government. Stay in office, grow the government, give money to their friends, pad their pocket, and we'll get into some of this other stuff later about where the money goes. That's the 17th Amendment. That's the second one. The third one is the biggest one. And you tell me, how many of you have ever heard this term? Okay, for everybody who's never heard that term, I want you to understand this is the most abominable thing that has ever happened to any one of our lives in the last 100 years. And you've never heard of it. And the only reason you would hear of it is probably either you were researching on your own, or you went to law school for some time, or you were an acting lawyer. This is a 20th century, now keep up with me here, this is a 20th century creation of progressive judges at the Supreme Court level. What it did was it took the 14th Amendment. For those who don't know what the 14th Amendment was, it gave rights of citizenship to newly freed slaves. They took the 14th Amendment and they said that it gave them the power to apply the Federal Bill of Rights onto the states. Do you believe the Bill of Rights in the federal Constitution protects you from the federal government? Absolutely. Not a trick question. Do you believe it protects you from your state government? I mean, be honest. Does the Bill of Rights in the federal Constitution, do you think it protects you from your state government? I'm going to tell you, most of you do. This is the kicker. To truly support the Constitution, federalism, republicanism, and limited government, one must reject the notion that the Bill of Rights in the federal Constitution applies to the states. It absolutely does not. So when you hear people running around talking about the Second Amendment, as long as they're talking about it protecting them from the federal government infringing on their guns, they're right. If they're talking about the Second Amendment protecting them in the state of Texas from citizens of Texas, they're wrong. And I've had that conversation in front of 1,000 long guns at the Alamo. It shocks them a little bit. This is the major issue with incorporation. And we're going to get into this. Centralizing all government power, it obliterated state sovereignty. And it made we the people the subject to the whims of a few elites and their friends. Now, I like to say this, and for those of you who are history buffs, you get the connection. It made we the people subject to the whims of a few elites in a town far, far away. Similar to about 240 years ago, when they were dealing with some elites in a town far, far away. This is where we're at. Little tidbit of information, just so everybody puts it in context. The framers of the Constitution met in Philadelphia in 1787. 70 delegates were appointed. Only 55 attended, and only 39 signed off on the document. And 8 or 9 of the others, Elbridge Gerry, Patrick Henry, George Mason, these folks were adamant they were not going to sign off on it. And why? Because they said that new government would be too powerful. Absolutely too powerful. Patrick Henry just rode the high horse through his state legislature in Virginia when they were debating it, saying no way, they should not do it. This is the kicker. At the end of the Philadelphia Convention, they said, look, we will take this back to the states as written. We will help it go through the state ratification debates. And should it get ratified, we'll help you do all this, but the first order of business, should it get ratified, is that we're going to put further constraints on this new government. And they agreed. They were principled individuals at that time. So they went and they took them back to their states, and it barely ratified. And what did they do? The first Congress followed through, and they ratified the first 10 amendments, which was the Bill of Rights. I want you, everybody to pay attention. It's in all your pocket constitutions. Everybody carries around their pocket constitution. Read it. The conventions of a number of states having at the time of their adopting the Constitution expressed a desire in order to prevent misconstruction or abuse of its powers. Not their own states, its powers. That further declaratory and restrictive clauses should be added. This is the preamble. It's the legal description of the Bill of Rights offered by the first Congress. It does not mince words. It means exactly what it says. Now remember how nervous these folks are, right? They're dealing with just getting away from King George. They've had all this tyrannical, all this taxation. My Lord, they were dealing with taxation. They were hating it. They were worried they would have another tyrant move in. They'd have another king. We create this new dictator. So they were all nervous. And as extending the ground of public confidence in the government will best ensure the beneficent ends of its institution. They are not talking about their own power. They are talking about this new government. This is what got me talking about this to you today. This one little data point. The Supreme Court upheld the understanding of the Bill of Rights as a restriction on the federal government only for over 135 years. The Supreme Court. Now, why is it we don't know that? Because what we have today is called case precedent. So lawyers go to school. Therefore, state law in all 50 states, you take a constitutional law class. The problem is that's a play on words because there's really no constitution in the constitutional law class. It's all law precedent. So they come out of these law schools basically able to parrot justices for the last 100 years, but they can't really tell you anything about the people who passed the amendments to the Constitution or what they debated. There's 3 cases I'm going to explain to y'all in very simple explanation, so I kind of give you some context of what happened. In Barron v. Baltimore in 1833, understand how close that is to the Constitution. This is still in the original years. Barron v. Baltimore, Mr. Barron had a business on the wharf in Baltimore. The city of Baltimore and the mayor decided they were going to divert. It sounds like something that happened today. They decided they were going to divert drainage from a road project in Baltimore to the wharf. The drainage silted in the wharf. It made it so that the vessels that came in and did business at Mr. Barron's his location couldn't get there. They couldn't berth. So he sued. And he was awarded $4,500, which is a huge amount of money at that time. Well, the appellate court overturned it, and he took it to the Supreme Court, or took it to the federal court. It went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, the Constitution was ordained and established by the people of the United States for themselves, for their own government, and not for the government of the individual states. That is a very small portion of a pretty lengthy description that says, it doesn't have anything to do with us. Now, are you ever going to see a Supreme Court today say, oh, and by the way, we don't have the authority to rule on this under the Constitution, so it's none of our business? Never. You're never going to hear that. And by the way, this was the winning, this is, everything I'm talking about is the majority side. It's not the losing side. These are the folks who were in power. Now, that was 1833. Understand that the 14th Amendment, which is the one that's being abused, is being used like a weapon against us today. This is the big kicker for it. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities. That's your first one. Of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property. That's the second one. Without due process, nor deny any person within its jurisdiction equal protection of the laws. Due process, privileges or immunities, and life, liberty, or property. Okay, those are big terms. Here's the thing. The 14th Amendment, which gave benefits of citizenship to newly freed slaves, was ratified, and that's a whole other story in and of itself. You want to Google it up and see how the 14th Amendment was ratified, you'll see that basically it wasn't ratified, but that's a whole other argument. In 1868, and according to the members of Congress in both parties, I'm still reading through the debates on this thing, but no one disagreed with this, simply constitutionalized the Civil Rights Act of 1866. Now, I'm going to oversimplify this. You got the Civil War, right? You got newly freed slaves. You got the 13th Amendment, does away with abolishing slavery. They passed the 14th Amendment, however it is they passed it. We'll call it as if it was done, to give rights of citizenship to newly freed slaves, some of which were here longer than some of their white counterparts. Now, everybody understands one Congress is not going to bind the hands of a future Congress, right? So if it's just an act, if it's just a Civil Rights Act of 1866, if the South were to gain in population and representation and decide, like the next go-around, they were going to repeal an act, they could. So how do you slow that down as much as possible? You amend the Constitution. So they constitutionalized, was the terminology, the Civil Rights Act of 1866 through the 14th Amendment. But the 14th Amendment conveyed no power whatsoever to the federal government to apply that federal Bill of Rights to the states. If you were, and I'll get into this a little bit, if you were to go read the Civil Rights Act of 1866 and you talk about due process and privileges and immunities, due process is, there's no extended extra rights given. It's the same rights you and I have and the same protections you and I have, meaning the same protections like the Bill of Rights is a restriction on the federal only. It didn't apply it to us. It gave them the same protections that it gave us, which was against the federal. Due process is simply access to courts, ability to face your accuser, representation, those types of things. Privileges and immunities, all of those things have to do with things like being able to enter into contracts and to purchase real estate. Really basic, fundamental aspects that we take for granted as regular citizens, but they didn't have at that time. You got to know a little bit about this because this gives you a trend in the Supreme Court's mentality, okay? This is after the 14th Amendment. Slaughterhouse cases. The story behind this one is kind of gross. In the city of New Orleans, they had a lot of packing houses and butchers that worked upstream of New Orleans on the river. And New Orleans at that time had a very high rate of sickness and all kinds of different things that aren't worth unmentionables, not worth talking about. And the primary reason they thought was because they had a lot of things like entrails and carcasses and things that were coming down the river to the city, making everybody sick. So the state of Louisiana and the city of New Orleans, the way they rectified that was they went and they got a piece of property on the south side, the downstream side of the river, and they told all the processors and butchers, if you want to do business here, you're going to do it on this property. And they sued. And it was a number of butcher cases. It turned into the slaughterhouse cases. They sued under everything. They sued under the 13th Amendment, saying they were being put into servitude, which you got a whole lot of older white men suing under the 13th Amendment. Didn't look very good at that time. They sued under the 14th Amendment and due process and all these different aspects. They were trying to apply the Federal Bill of Rights onto the states. Well, this is what the Supreme Court said after the 14th Amendment when it was trying to, somebody wanted them to apply it. The effect is to fetter and degrade the state governments by subjecting them to control of Congress and the exercise of powers heretofore universally conceded to them. They wrote very well at that time. It's harder to read than it is. Of the most ordinary and fundamental character, we are convinced that no such results were intended by the Congress which proposed these amendments, nor by the legislatures of the states which ratified them. Basically, they're saying, if we were to go along with your case is saying that the states are giving all their power away to the Congress. And they knew that wasn't the way it was designed. And that's after the 14th Amendment, when they tried to utilize it. Now, 50 some odd years later, in 1925, now around 1910 or so, early 20th century, we started the what? Progressive era. Okay? Well, this is the 50 caliber gun that was used against state sovereignty, freedom, federalism. This is it. Gitlow v. New York. Very simple. The way it began was very simple. Gitlow was a socialist, and he wrote and published socialist diatribe and was arrested. And it worked its way through the New York judiciary and ended up in the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court took it up, and he argued on behalf of the First Amendment in the Federal Bill of Rights. And he said, you can't lock me up for printing all this. Freedom of the press, freedom of speech, right? Now, pay very close attention to this justice. And I underline and put that in italicized just so I want you to understand that word. For present purposes, we may and do assume that the rights of freedom of speech and freedom of the press were among the fundamental rights and liberties protected by the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment from impairment by the states. So they reached out there. Now, I want you to understand, that's his words. You see states? Lowercase. Justice Sanford. So what they did is they said, what the first Congress said doesn't mean what they said. And that no one really agreed to this when they ratified the 14th Amendment. But, and I always say this when I go somewhere, this is how I'm just a layman. This is how it comes across to me. In 1925, you got Supreme Court justices who basically do this. They say, well, you know, no one ever really agreed to this at that time, but luckily for you, we're here and we're so much smarter than you are, and we know what they really meant. What they really meant was we can apply the Federal Bill of Rights onto the states. And that was never the intent, but that's what they said. And it started out as what was called selective incorporation. Today, they've just incorporated everything. I'm an anti-abortion guy. It's my faith. It's my belief in life. I value life. These are aspects that are being abused by the federal government through incorporation. Be a free and independent state and get sued. Not an I independent state. I'll fix that. Place the name of God, Scripture, 10 Commandments in a public building. We got to argue about that every time they do it somewhere in the state or any state because, you know, we might get sued. Or make it a crime to burn a Texas or U.S. flag because, you know what, that's free speech. You can't go to jail for burning a Texas flag. You can get your tail kicked in if you come on my property and burn a Texas flag, but that's a whole different story. Recognizing marriage between one man or one woman, or don't recognize marriage at all. That's the freedom of a state to do, but if you do so, you're going to get sued. Decide whether pornography is art or pornography, right? Write laws against abortion as a choice of birth control. Decide not to pay for education of illegal aliens. How many folks have lived here longer than 30 years? Wow, y'all remember James Plyler? School superintendent? Y'all remember Tyler is the home of anchor babies. Do y'all know that? I always ask people, when I talk to young students or young adults at these universities, you know, how long has anchor baby status been around? Birthright citizenship, how long has it been here? Oh, man, 100 years. Oh, yeah, really? I was 17. It was here. It was Plyler v. Doe. That was when, if I remember correctly, they were trying to force us to educate illegal aliens. Tyler couldn't afford it. I think they were going to charge a fee for it. The Supreme Court told them you can't do that because the Texas Constitution says it's a free and public education, which it does, but that's for citizens. And I can almost quote it, but don't hold me to this. Listen to how ridiculous this statement was. I want to say this justice's name was Brennan. If I'm wrong, I'm sorry. He said, there is he can't discern any significant difference between those who came here legally and those who came here illegally. So I was thinking to myself, okay, well, how about one's legal and one's illegal? I think that's a pretty clear difference. Yeah. Didn't matter. That's where the legitimacy of anchor baby status came in. That's when the come over, have your baby at the emergency room, and now you got citizenship and a social security number, and we're going to pay for it. That's where it all started.
What year was that?
I think it was 82. And managing the bearing of arms as they see fit. Now, I'm a member of NRA, member of GOA, I'm a CHL holder. Up until 8 years ago, I was a huge Second Amendment guy. I was totally indoctrinated. I totally thought the federal bill. And I'm going to tell you how bad this is. I walked into a room with 150 people in it in Fort Worth, and I said, how many bills of rights are there? I had 25, 30 people go, one. I said, really, one? Not 51? There's 50 different states with 50 different constitutions. Why is that? Why do we need a constitution in Texas? We're all relegated to following one supposedly limited one, right? On the federal side. 50 different bills of rights. What do we need those for? We don't ever talk about them. All we ever talk about is the federal, which is supposed to only restrict them. But guess what? It's ours. So we got this whole dynamic going where everyone in this room, including myself just a few years ago, didn't understand the dynamic. We all think that it's the federal everything. So what happens? You end up with what happened in Illinois. And that's been in the last 10 years. How many of you ever heard of the McDonald v. Chicago is a lawsuit? Made national news. Older black gentleman wanted to have a pistol in his home for security. Didn't even involve a crime or anything. This was totally mundane. Man wanted to have a pistol in his home for security. The city of Chicago banned guns. Said you can't have a gun. It went through the Illinois Supreme Court. Judiciary went to the Supreme Court, and the Illinois Supreme Court said what? They said, well, sorry, the people of Chicago have spoken. They don't want guns. Can't have a gun. So the NRA went crazy. Every gun lobby group in the country went crazy. We were all bent out of shape. What do you mean he can't have a gun? They pushed it out into the federal judiciary. It went to the Supreme Court. And what did they say? Did they say, oh, well, the first Congress said we're not to infringe, which is the broadest term you could possibly use on the bearing of arms. But no. We're going to take it. Because they take everything. They have the power over everything. And they took it. And just 3 years ago, they ruled, and what they say? They said, let me tell you how this is what it means. They ruled, but this is how it is in layman's terms. They said, state of Illinois, you're not free and sovereign, you're not free and independent, and what the people of Illinois want doesn't matter. We, through incorporation, have the power to apply the Second Amendment onto your state. Therefore, that man can have a gun because the Second Amendment and the Federal Bill of Rights protects his right. And what did all the conservatives do? Yeah, boy, that Second Amendment. Let me tell you what's happening. Does politics move left or right? Let's be honest. I'm not here to play games with you. Let's be honest. It moves left. The cycle is simple. When a society begins, after it collapses and it's just hit the bottom, and it germinates and starts over again, at that very moment that society begins, that is the moment that is the most free, the most prosperous, the most moral it will ever be again. And that from that moment on, and there's only way you can describe it as this, they move left. And from the moment they start to prosper, they begin to move left, and it becomes socialized and nationalized, and empire takes over. And the next thing you know, they've come all the way around that apathetic sheeple, and they're on their way to collapse again. Politics only moves left. And people laugh, but you totally get what I'm saying. What we call moderate today, my grandparents called communism. So when you have, I'm going to say far right for you guys, when you have far right, which is more right than wrong, and you have far left, and they meet in the middle, we call it bipartisan, right? I got a friend of mine, a historian, he said that one party has grown to be stupid and one party has grown to be evil. And every once in a while they get together and they do something that's both stupid and evil, and we call it bipartisan. So that it ends up here, right? and then it moves left. And then we moderate, we cross the aisle, here we are again, and then it moves left. And a few generations from now, they're going to be in the parking lot, calling each other comrade. Right? That's the cycle we're dealing with. So, when you have an issue like what happened in Illinois, okay, we all clap and we go, yeah, Second Amendment, get to keep your guns and all that. Well, guess what? In 25 years, when that Supreme Court is even more liberal than it is today, and they're griping because we're not crossing over the aisle and meeting in the middle. And they wake up one day and they go, you know what? Luckily for your grandkids, they're there and they're so much smarter than everybody else. You know, they're elite. They're not even elected. They're there for life. They're going to wake up and say, you know what? Guns are so dangerous. We're just going to ban them nationally. Because we nationalized it. We gave them the power over something the first Congress said they absolutely did not have the power over. And our grandkids are going to go, you can't do that. And they're going to say, yes, we can. Your grandparents gave us the sanction, remember? That's where we're headed. It's painful pill to swallow, but that's the direction we're going. In Texas, this is the discussion I give to OCT guys. If you ever heard of OCT, it's Open Carry Texas. They've had me come speak at numerous events, and I've said every single one of them every time. But I always tell them, here's the deal. Your argument is not with the federal government. Just turn it off. Stop entertaining it. Your argument's in the state of Texas. We have a Bill of Rights in the state of Texas. Everybody understands our Bill of Rights protects your right to have a gun, to bear arms. Anybody ever read it? Read the very last line in our statute. I can't remember if it's 21, 22. I can't remember what it is. In our right to bear arms, in our Bill of Rights in the state of Texas, the last little statute says, and I'll paraphrase, I don't remember word for word, we reserve the right, Texas reserves the right to legislate the wearing of those arms towards safety. What does that mean? Reserves the right to legislate, period. That means that if we keep electing phony conservatives to the state house in Texas, and they keep appointing phony conservative Supreme Court justices in the Texas judiciary, our grandkids are going to wake up 20 years from now and they're going to go, you know what, guns are so unsafe that not only can you not wear them, you can't have them. And we're going to be dealing with it right here in Texas. So this next legislative session, we're going to be pushing to get that last caveat removed from our Bill of Rights altogether. But this is the direction we're going, and it's all because we've been nationalized. All. We have to wrap our head around this. Everybody thinks we support the Constitution and limited government. Everybody does. I mean, we hold up our Constitution, our little pocket Constitution. We quote Jefferson. We scream about don't tread on me and limited government and all that kind of stuff. But do we really believe it? We beg them to talk about everything under the sun. We beg them to protect our rights. We beg them to talk about marriage. We beg them to talk about guns. We beg them to talk about everything we can get them involved in that's none of their business. This could not be more true. Protecting natural rights and liberties is the responsibility of the citizens of each state. It's not the responsibility of a small group of political elites. Now, this is where I like to tell everybody about scale. Scale. There's 26 million people in the state of Texas today and growing. Think about that for a minute. That's almost 10 times more people than were in all 13 states combined when they ratified and implemented the Constitution. That's almost as many people as were in the entire United States when they fought the Civil War. In the United States today, there's over 316 million individuals who are managed by 546 elitists in a town far, far away. And to be even more serious about this and put it in more literal sense, there's over 316 million of us who are managed by 5 of 9 unelected judges. Now, you don't have to know a whole lot about history, or you can just have really good common sense and know nothing about history, and your guess is that formula is a formula for destruction. It's a terrible formula. The idea that Texas, remember what we talked about earlier, the framers wanted a 30,000 to 1 ratio, somewhere in that range. In Texas, we have our own issues. We're already about 5 times, 6 times higher than that. in Texas. And yet we're still fighting with 546 individuals and one Yahoo that's supposed to be quiet and sitting down, who's the president, who's supposed to be executing the will of the people and not dictating. Which, don't everybody point at Obama by himself. It's been happening for about 50 years. Actually longer than that. But I say this because I want everybody to get a concept that you can take with you and remember all the time. Federalism is so simple. Federalism is divested power. This is what they wanted. Federalism creates a free market for liberty. The framers of the Constitution didn't even know what free market terminology was. Half of the politicians that stand up in front of groups and use the term free market don't have a clue what it means. They just say it because the young folks think it's cool. The fact is, the framers of the Constitution were very aware that if they left the states to legislate according to their will and wishes, that liberty would have the highest protection, the most maximum protection. Why was that? It's because if a state were to write laws that were to oppress or destroy the liberty of its citizens, what would they do? They'd leave. They'd go to another state. So you'd end up with states going, well, wait a minute, that was a mistake. We need to do something different because we just lost all of our basis for tax revenue and militia and everybody's support system is leaving. So we got to, wait a minute, we didn't mean that. So what have we done today? We've driven everything to the center. So now instead of Texas writing laws according to our morals, values, and principles, we write laws and then we go, okay, wait a minute. What's the federal government going to say about this? Now, I'm a Christian. I believe in life. I support life. I believe using abortion as a choice of birth control is murder. The idea that the citizens of Texas can't do the work of the citizens of Texas at the state legislature without having an impact from citizens from other states coming in buses with cans of urine and jars of feces to throw on our state legislators while we're trying to do the business in Texas offends me greatly. What offends me even more than that is that we have state legislators who have gotten so distracted from their conservative base and are so concerned with this national viewpoint that they literally have convinced themselves that they can go to the floor of the House in the state of Texas and argue for restricting abortions after 20 weeks in the womb as a choice of birth control, and they think they've done something good. They bring that back to me, I'm not the guy they want to talk to. You want to do something for me, you understand how a republic works, you understand how this Constitution is supposed to work, you pass legislation according to our traditional values and morals and principles in Texas. You tell the other states to do their own. We pass it here. We restrict it the way we see fit. We tell the federal government to pound sand. And then, where do states go to lose? We've been talking about it for an hour. Federal judiciary. Now, how does the state deal with that? I get this all the time. I get it from historians and professors all the time. Well, how are you going to deal with it? What are you going to do? I mean, really, what are you going to do? You don't participate. Everybody wants to say they're going to bring the military down here. If we do anything the federal government doesn't want, everybody wants to go fall off the far end. Well, they'll just bring in the guns and they'll enforce us. With what? There's 1.5 million people in the military in the United States. They are strung out all over the planet. There's 26 million citizens in the state of Texas. You're going to tell me that if the state of Texas tells the federal government we're going to take care of social issues here ourselves according to our values, they're going to shut down a global military force and bring them all to Texas? I seriously doubt that. Sure would like to see the question asked, though. That's where we're at. We're going to have to get state legislators in Texas who are willing to put their foot down and go, we're not playing the charade anymore. Stop participating. And when they write legislation that's like the TSA bill that David Simpson, who I respect greatly, I told him, when you write this TSA bill and you say, we're not going to grope our citizens, you're not going to molest my kids and my wife before they get on a plane to go from Austin to Dallas. We're not going to do that. When you write that bill, put in that bill that we're going to pass this legislation. We do not recognize incorporation. Put it out there in public so people have to talk about it. And then add a little caveat. Say anybody in Texas caught giving aid, information, documents, answering phones in any way, shape, or form to the federal government in relation to a lawsuit or litigation surrounding this legislation is going to go to jail. Because in Texas, when we say we're not going to participate, we're not going to participate. Now, they'll stick with you right up till that point. At that point, they go, oh, well, what? Otherwise, you end up with politicians who say over and over and over again, I'll sue them for you. Hey, thanks, man. That's working out great. Yeah, that's working out great. The Supreme Court has it down to a fine art. They smack you in the mouth about 50 times, and then once they're going to grab some little nuance of a ridiculous law, and they're going to reach out there and pat you on the head and go, yeah, that's yours. And then we're all going to jump around and clap and scream and holler that, yeah, states. And the next day they're going to rule and kick our teeth in again. This is not designed to be free and independent states. Today we are designed to have overlords. And that's what we have. All we have is nationalism, and nationalism is a cancer. And it creates tyranny coming and going. I mean, it just creates it in spades. You can take letters, throw them against the wall, and you're going to come up with any of 150 different agencies. And that doesn't even count the NGO, non-governmental agencies that are, or organizations that are being funded with money that you owe. They're borrowing in your name, and our names, and our kids' names, and our grandkids' names. This is where we've gotten to. Now, the pushback is going to be at the state level. So I'm a huge advocate for really coming down hard on these state representatives. Really. They're the folks who are going to have to initiate all this. There will never be a correction made at the top. I mean, I tell everybody there's a different thing between what you hope to be true and what you know to be true. I'm a Republican, lifelong Republican. I have Jeffersonian principles. I can tell you out loud and proud that everybody I run into has a hope for truth, which is they hope if we just elect enough Republicans, they'll fix everything. Okay, well, that's what you hope to be true. Because I can walk in the same room and say, is there ever going to be a time when the majority in Washington, D.C. make the decisions necessary to correct the path that we're on? And no one will raise their hand. And I'll say, guess what? That's what you know to be true. That's in your bone marrow. You know that. But I can ask the same, I can go right after that and I can say, but if we elect all Republicans, could we start to fix it? And half of them will go, yeah. And I'll go, oh, really? That's worked out so well the last century. You can trend that government for 100 years. It doesn't matter which party's in power or which head's the president. It graphs the same way. Larger debt, larger government, larger debt, larger government, less freedom. It's a simple formula. Oh, by the way, what happens when we give national government power over a right? What's that your grandfather said? Anybody powerful enough to give it to you is powerful enough to take it away? That's what we're doing. The more we give them, the more they have access to yank it out from under us. And that's what they're doing. I tell every single state legislator this, and I tell them you need to say this every single time you get a microphone stuck in your face, every single time the Texas Tribune, unless it concerns a power delegated to it by the states, stay out of the business of Texas. If they would say that religiously, every single time they get to a paper, every single time they're asked a question, that's what they need to say about the federal government. Stop entertaining them in the whole discussion. Just get them out of it. I believe this with all my heart. I believe we can still be the salt and the light. I think we can still set the example. I think we find the right candidates, which is a huge deal. We've got to find the right candidates. Federalism is the answer to every ill we have, and we've gotten displaced from it. They'll still teach it in school somewhat. People will still get the terminology, but they don't really get the concept of what it meant. What you're doing right now is part of this. I tell everybody, I was 41 years old before I even started into the source documents, and I'm only partially into everything. I mean, there's so much of it. It's such a massive amount of information. But the thing is, once you know something, you know it. It doesn't change it. If I don't know everything, I'm not a scholar. There are lots of things about the Constitution I don't know. Lots. I'm learning every day. And if I don't know it, you're going to know it right away. But what I know, I know. And unless you can prove me wrong, you're going to lose. It is never too late to learn. Never. You got to find candidates, and I don't care if they're running for dog catcher. If it's animal control, talk to them about the relationship between the federal and the states. Talk to them about it. You got to find I don't know, is the sheriff here, he pretty states' rights guy? Yeah. Smith?
He needs your help too.
He needs my help too. Look, everybody frowns at this, and I'm dead serious. You're talking to a dad who's on the school board at Tarkington Independent School District, who has a business, a wife, 3 kids, doesn't really want to be doing anything political, but is so irritated by everything that this is where I'm at. These people who understand the Constitution exist. I found them. There's more of us every day. You just got to find them. But if you can't find one, you got to be one. And I don't care who you are or where you come from. It's not about whether you're an academic. It's not about whether or not you were groomed and developed and went to the right school and have the right connections. We got to throw all that in the trash can. We got to get people who understand real basic understanding of liberty and freedom. Limited government. It's not just code words. They're not just code words. If you want to be free, you've got to understand there's a difference between being charitable because you choose to do so and having someone hold a gun to your head, take your earnings, and go do something in the name of charity that you did not give your consent for. That is the life we live today. We can change that, but we're going to have to do it right here in the state of Texas. I say this lovingly to all my friends in the other states. I really don't care anything about the other states. If you're getting invaded, call us. We're going to be right there. But until that happens, really, send me a Christmas card, give me a phone call. I don't care what you're doing in California. I don't care what you're doing in New York. Oh, and the flip side to this argument, for all you Second Amendment lovers out there, is there is another side to the argument. What about people who really don't want guns? Second Amendment. Right now, the way it's written right now, Second Amendment protects your right to have a gun, even in a community that doesn't want guns. In New York, they have a Bill of Rights. It does not protect your right to bear arms. This is what I ask everybody, and you can apply this to abortion, you can apply it to marriage, you can apply it to guns. What if the people in Connecticut elect people to represent them? They elect their representatives to go to their state legislature and to write laws that recognize Adam, Mary, and Steve. What business is it of Texas? None. And you need to keep it like that. We got to go back to that, because the people in Connecticut who don't agree with that principle, they're happy to come down here and we'll greet them. And anybody in Texas that really wants to live in that environment, they're going to go there. And in New York, if they want to write laws that so much as ban guns, and we all know only the criminals will have them, let them do it. What's it to us? We've got no business trying to influence law in another state. It's none of our business. But we've been so nationalized that we get on the news, which we have the ESPN for news for politics today, right? You wake up with it, you go to bed with it. We Facebook on it all day long. It's 24 hours a day. We know our pundits better than we know history, folks in the history. The fact is, if we lived under federalism, you wouldn't have any of those issues. The 24-hour news cycle would go away. Because we wouldn't be looking at TV and going, look at what those Californians are doing. What is wrong with those people? Federal government needs to stop that. I would have loved to have been elected, or been the guy who's going to be the U.S. Senator from Texas, because I would love to have been the guy that the Fox News or CNN or whoever stuck a microphone in their mouth and said, well, Connecticut's doing this, this, and this, and they want to pass legislation to correct that. And I would go, whoa. In Texas, we kind of got that covered. What they do there is their business. Thank you very much. They'd call you the biggest terrorist that ever hit the planet. Right? It's not that big a deal. to get people who understand this concept. You do not have to be overly educated in this. It's very simple. If you understand divesting power and you understand that centralizing power is bad, you get it. Y'all want to stand up for a second? Because the second part's really short.
Keep going.
All right. You want to stand? Y'all can stand up. Now I'm going to tell you something. I'm going to ask everybody. I got to raise about 50 grand to make this happen for a year because we're scheduling presentations at a rate way faster than we can afford to get there and get back. So I'm only telling you that now because I'm fixing to talk about why you don't give money to people. So I'm telling you that now so that we'll get on the same page.
Double-edged sword.
Y'all are going to get a kick out of this part. This is what I learned with a private investigator the last 2 months of the campaign. Is it 7:45? Oh, good. That will take about 15 minutes to get through that. We'll be off on time. Oh, we got questions. Has anybody got any questions about what we're talking about?
I got one right here. It says, if you hold your cards up, we'll collect them, and I'll get them out.
Bring it on.
Let me get the mic on, Dwayne.
Oh,
No, I've got one. Just so y'all know, this is the blank card that I hold up. Somebody's not being ignored. Okay. No, you might be. Am I on?
you're on.
Turn it on.
What would you cut in the Texas state budget? How many representatives should the U.S. Congress actually have?
Oh, goodness gracious. There are, what would I cut in the state budget? Oh, good Lord. I'm right now I'm on fire because I just spent 2 days with TASB. Y'all know who TASB is? Texas Association of School Boards.
Oh, yeah.
They had their big training this last weekend in San Antonio. Got to listen to some speakers talk about some very relevant topics like raising children in school, which is basically, they want to talk about everything but the direct education portion of it. They want to talk about everything from psychology to so many aspects of how you interact with the children that circumvents the parent and gets you into a parental role where you're actually raising the children. I'm a little old school for a lot of what they bring to the table. But education-wise, I would cut so much it's not even funny. You know we have a sports fund in Texas? Now, you may not know it looking at me now, but I'm a sports guy. I got kids that are in sports. We sponsor local sports like crazy. I love it. We're active in our community. But the fact of the matter is, if you read the Constitution in Texas, and we have one, in our Constitution in Texas, it says that we are going to have a free and public education. Now, they have sued in federal court over 2 terms. One was efficiency, and what was the other one? It was efficient method of diffusion of knowledge. There's another one too, but the 2 words, that's doesn't mean anything. Because the 2 words, it was efficiency and something else. But the issue here is that the 2 words they argued over were meaningless. In between those 2 words is a line that tells you the purpose of an education, and it's in our Constitution. Purpose of an education is for them to learn to protect their liberties and their rights. That's the purpose. So I always ask legislators down in Austin, so is Little Johnny's jump shot or Becky's drama class or Johnny's French horn or are all those part of protecting your liberties and your rights? Because, you know, I got my daughter played right here at TJC in volleyball, got out of high school. I get it, but the thing is, are taxpayers supposed to be responsible for funding anything outside the purpose of that Constitution? We even have a sports fund that underwrites a lot of bonding around the state for these $10 million stadiums. That, oh, by the way, don't think you're not on the hook for a $20 million stadium in West Texas. That's yours too, whether you like it or not. There's so much in education that I'd cut. It's not the pension aspect of it, which they just went up on what the school districts are fixing to pay for their pensions because we're underfunded, in case y'all didn't know that. Texas owes like $220 million billion dollars in unfunded liabilities, most of its pension, and it's growing. I asked our CFO, who's been around the school district 25 years, I said, they just raised our rate. They're going to raise the rate on what they take from the teachers next year or the year after. Will that ever stop? He said, no. It's never going to stop because they can't keep up with the growth of debt. It is going to stop one day. Yes, ma'am.
Are you going to run again?
Oh, I don't know. After I get through talking to everybody about this, I don't know if I won't say something that will totally destroy me if I run again.
Lincoln said in a speech to an original session to Congress on July 4th, 1861, that the Union created the states, not vice versa, which is the way it really happened. In my mind, this rewriting of history by Lincoln et al. Is a lie when his had a devastating effect on our states' rights. What's your take on this idea?
Oh, he was wrong. He was wrong on so many levels, it's not even funny. I mean, the states came first. They created the document. The document is what the federal government's supposed to be. The document came first. The document's what created the government. Lincoln was an abomination. He was a monster. I mean, he's responsible for over 800,000 casualties of American citizens.
He's saying this pledge, flag, one nation. That's wrong.
It's absolutely wrong.
There are 50 nation states.
That's right.
Not many people understand it.
That's not true either. I had a very liberal member of the media who called me and was just grilling me left and right, just grilling me, because Tea Party guy, don't tread on me, boy's going to hit me with the whole, go all the way back to slavery, Civil Rights Act, and all that stuff. And I was going, we got an amendment. What's the issue? And he said, well, he would hit me with all these things, trying to find something. And he said something about secession. He said, do you think Texas can secede? I said, I think any state can secede. And he said, well, the Civil War fixed that. And I said, nah, I don't think so. He said, well, what makes you think the Civil War? They said that clearly. And I said, well, there's one thing they're missing, and I haven't found that document. And he said, what document? And I said, oh, that document back when they signed off on the Constitution, they ratified it and implemented it. I can't seem to find that document that said, okay, fellas, we're going to sign off and we're going to create this new government, but anybody that gets out of the Union, we're going to kill you. I didn't see that document anywhere. So, no, that's...
I don't think David Barton has it either. What is the best way to stop the anchor babies, one that can be sold to the people?
That's one of the rare areas I think we're going to have to go through the whole process and relitigate. I don't want to talk to the federal judiciary about most things that are states' rights issues. I want to just stop them in the tracks and make them deal with it on their own. This is something we're going to have to go through the whole course, because I don't think there's anybody in the room that believes realistically that you can go back 30 years and say, oh, and all of this doesn't mean anything. It's been that way for 30 years. So they're going to have to relitigate it, get it rewritten, get it turned over, and those who have been here under that law are here. There's not going to be, you can't do anything with that. So I don't know how you would deal with that otherwise. It's not like you can really say no to that. That's connected to the Constitution in a way. They need to take it up again. But that's for all the states. They need to do that to get that out in the open for all 50 states. It's not like we can just isolate it here and say we're not going to address it here. That needs to be union-wide. You rarely hear me say go to court with anyone.
Would you ever endorse a libertarian over a Republican?
Sure. I would endorse Keisha Rogers over John Cornyn. Anybody ever hear her? Yeah. Good Lord. Impeach Obama. He's destroying the Constitution. What'd she call herself, a LaRouche Democrat? She only had one problem. I was at 3 or 4 events where she was at. She only had one. She wanted to get Texas back, the sciences back in Texas, get NASA rolling again, do all these, and it sounded great. I mean, there were Republicans turning their whiplash around with her. And I got up there and I said, Keisha, that's a great idea. How do you going to pay for that? Well, then it all fell apart. But, you know.
In Article 6, Section 2, it says the Constitution shall be the supreme law of the land, and the judges in every state shall be bound thereby. Doesn't this mean the Bill of Rights applies to everyone, everywhere?
No. The Constitution is the supreme law of the land. That is for all laws that are pursuant, for everything pursuant, and that word is in the Constitution. It is for laws pursuant to that document. Anything, they're the supreme law of the land. The federal judiciary can rule over anything pursuant to that document. Anything outside of that's none of their business. So if it pertains to anything in the document, that's the supreme law of the land. I mean, no state's going to go start coining money for themselves because that's in the document. And it takes precedent. But there's nothing in the document about you having to allow abortion in your state. Nothing. And I'll tell you, the backlash to that argument is life, liberty, and property. Life. You need a federal law. If we want to amend the Constitution and make it across the board that life begins at conception, I'm good with that. That's an amendment. That changes the whole dynamic, that puts the power there. Otherwise, do you want to pass a law that says life, liberty, and property must be protected? Therefore, life, we're going to pass a law that says that you can't have abortions. Well, no, you can't do that, because if you're going to go that way, then I'm on the left. I'm going to go, oh, well, life, we got to have an EPA, right? Got to protect your life, your kids, air. Hey, that coal plant's killing people. So where do you stop it?
Well, the 14th Amendment says you cannot be deprived of life, liberty, or
Property. That's right.
So that just applies, the federal government cannot divide property of life, liberty, and property, but the state can?
Oh, the states, I can't remember the ruling, but there's a ruling where they actually said states can write laws adverse to the Federal Bill of Rights, and they can't do anything about it. You can write laws in Texas that say, if you say in a state, they could actually pass I'm not saying I advocate for this, but they could pass a state religion. By the way, when they signed off on the Bill of Rights, the First Amendment states now, Congress shall make no law establishing a religion. Multiple states had state religion for decades. They had a state tax for Puritanism in Connecticut for decades. So I always ask everybody, well, do you think they'd have signed off on that document if they thought they were signing away their rights to have a Puritan state? I don't think so.
What do you think of secession?
Secession? I don't want to depress anybody I'm friends with the guy who's the president of TNM, and I'll irritate him a little bit with this, but that's a will of the people. It doesn't matter whether it's Montana or Texas or California or any other state. If the will of the people is such, their state legislators are bound to act on that will. If the will is not there, it's not going to happen. For me personally, I've read just enough history to get a clear mind that says it's never going to happen by the will of the people. It's going to happen by what historically is the reason, which is tight stomachs. The will of the people will follow their tummies. When they're starving, they make big social upheaval decisions that they won't otherwise make if they're still got TV and they've still got their Obama phone. And as long as that's still happening, you're never going to get them to say, what, you want me to turn off that spigot going to the federal government? No. So also, secession's an interesting discussion when you're talking about empires, because the United States is an empire. And if you look at like the Soviet Union or the Roman Empire or any of these throughout history, when they collapsed, they fractured into all kinds of different countries. So there's nothing to say 50 years from now the United States is going to exist in the framework that it is today. So
That's what they want.
I think I think there's more of a global positioning of everything. And I believe that, but I really believe it now because in February, I was speaking with some students at Texas A&M University. They're Young Americans for Liberty. We talked about economics. I've traded construction equipment globally on a small scale since about '98. Learned quite a bit about international exchange and monetary policy and this. We talked economics for a while. The guy that runs it is a graduate student in economics at A&M. When it was over, he came up and shook my hand. He said, "Man, I really appreciate you being here. Just thought, you talked about the Federal Reserve and us being the world reserve currency. I thought you might be interested to know that the professor I work under told me this morning," now understand, this is in February, he told me this morning that A&M is actively working with the UN to develop a global currency. And I said, "Oh, they are? Well, isn't that nice?" So, yes, it's widespread. I worry about the globalist aspect of it. I don't care what's going on in the rest of the planet like the elites do, that control mechanism that's there. I'm much more concerned with what's going on in my county or, you know.
Does anybody else have any more questions?
What you're talking about right there, I have an idea that Central America and South America. I have an idea that Central America and South America they really think that we have gone way too far when we call ourselves America, just the United States. We refer to ourselves as American, and with the Central Americans coming up to the United States right now in large numbers, I really think that they're trying to say that we're all Americans, and they're working toward the idea of the United States of America being from Greenland all the way down to Tierra del Fuego or whatever that place is right down at the bottom of South America.
Well, hey, Canadians are American too.
I think that's what they're working toward.
What's your thoughts on a constitutional convention? First of all, there's a couple different ways for it to be done. What are your thoughts on that?
In Article 5, what you're talking about, I'm neutral. When we're talking about the economics and the currency, the devaluation of the currency, the amount of debt we have, all of that plays into my mentality heavily. That's my forte. Article 5, here's the way I look at it. It's two sides. If you are for an Article 5, if you're against an Article 5, have somebody ask it this way to you. If you disagree with the unlimited growth, tyrannical, unconstitutional behavior of the government that we have today, but yet you are unwilling to use the mechanism that George Mason put in the Constitution for us to rein in an out-of-control, unlimited, tyrannical government, you are necessarily giving your sanction to the unlimited, tyrannical government you have today. So if you're unwilling to use it, you're giving your sanction to what you have today. That's one way to look at it. The flip side to that is, that's a huge undertaking. And by the time you got 2/3 of the states to request it, formally acknowledge it's going to happen, pick a location, get your delegates selected, get them there, have that argument take place for we don't know how long, if they were to actually approve a proposal. And by the way, anybody who's scared about Article 5s, we can get into this argument all day long. The issue is you got to read what it says. It's not an amendments convention. It's a proposal convention. States can only make proposals. They're not amending the Constitution at the convention. So let's say they get there and they make a proposal and they happen to get one approved between 50 states. What happens next? It goes back to the state legislatures where they have to debate it again, and that's where we would get involved. It's the state capital in Austin, and every other state would have the same issue. So you're telling me that they would get them to request it, get it scheduled, get them there, actually get something approved, get it back to 50 state legislations, 3/4 of which have to approve it and get it back to Congress to amend the Constitution. I think by the time they got 3/4 of the way through that process, we would have defaulted on everything we're doing with our currency. I don't think we have that many years built into this thing. So I understand people who support it, and I understand people who are against it. Yes, sir.
What's your view Okay,
That-
let's
Once
time
that's
out.
a notification.
Let's time out. We put cards in your seats to write questions on. Write the questions down. Patty, you get them. Let's do part two, then we'll continue with the question. But if you have a question,
run through this pretty
please
quick.
write on the card and we'll ask it.
I'll run through this pretty quick. What I do? Oh, here it is. Okay, the last 2 months of the campaign, we had a private investigator and some investigative journalists working on our behalf. Everybody knows I'm just Joe Nobody. I wasn't groomed for politics, wasn't built into it, don't have any connections to it. This is the only thing I can think to call it. How we were managed and manipulated and why nothing we care about really matters. This is what I learned the last 2 months of the campaign. Everybody hears this. In politics, it's not just follow the money. Everybody hears follow the money. It's not just follow the money. It's follow your money. Your money. I can't stress this enough. How many people get mail every single day or every other day, especially during an election cycle, asking you for donations to support conservative candidates or whatever? I want you to understand there's a whole industry of it on the other side of the fence, on the left side, wanting to support liberal candidates. It's a marketing schematic. Just for your own reference, you're writing anything down, write this down. Big Sky, Big Money, that's on Frontline. If you Google Frontline, Big Sky, Big Money, you will see an hour-long documentary on what became Citizens United. Everybody know what Citizens United was? That's the lawsuit brought in Montana that ended up in federal court. Federal Supreme Court said that, what was it? Corporations are people? Yeah. Last time I checked, corporations don't vote, but that's a whole different story. They said that they can spend money any way they want on politics, and they've created some avenues for the way they could spend unlimited dollars. Oh, might want to watch this. It says, Big Sky, Big Money tracks the inner workings of dark money group Western Tradition Partnership through boxes of documents initially found in a meth house in Colorado. Following the broadcast, a Montana judge ruled that WTP, that Western Tradition Partnership, had violated state's campaign finance laws, and the group's executive director, Donnie Ferguson, resigned, taking a new position working for Steve Stockman. This was in 12. Now, everything I'm talking to you about today is totally legal. So let's clear the air right now. There's only one thing in this whole thing that's illegal, and I'm going to point it out to you. Everything we're going to talk about, it's insidious and it's evil, but it's legal. If you were to look up Eugene Delgadio, which a lot of you have gotten mail, and I know Anthony gets mail all the time from him. If you were to Google Donnie Ferguson and Eugene Delgadio, you would find these money laundering issues. Public advocate for the United States. Anybody ever see anything from them? That's Eugene Delgadio. I'm tying these names together. We'll flip through it and I'll show you how it all works out. And by the way, this is only one example. These examples I'm giving you, this is only one. There's hundreds of these. These are letters that they send out. Ask Senator Cornyn and the rest, what are they hiding? And thank Congressman Stockman. This is coming out from Public Advocate of the United States, which is a nonprofit. Eugene Delgadio, president. This is, and you guys can't see it, I barely can see it. This is a submittal from Public Advocate of the United States. This is 2011, this is the latest we could get. $1.1 million in revenue. No payments to any employees, but amazingly, paid Eugene Delgadio $130,000. The partnership ended up making around $500,000, that $1.1 million. The vast majority of that money goes back into mailers and sending them back out to reestablish more money. This is about donors. Anybody know who Mia Love is? This email came out in February. This is not old. Mia Love can be the next member of Congress. She's from Utah. She's a great candidate. Black, female, conservative, mom, smart. She's got everything working for her. This group is called Patriots for Economic Freedom. This group is another nonprofit. It says, as a mother of three, love understands how devastating policies of Obama can be. It says, we must work to elect this dedicated patriot. Donate, 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 right? This comes in your mail, it comes in your email. They spam everybody to death with it. Patriots for Economic Freedom. Patriots for Economic Freedom didn't make any contributions to federal candidates in 2014. But they're using her in their mailers, right? Patriots for Economic Freedom raised over $200K. In this filing, they raised $136,000. Contributions to federal candidates was zero. And I put this up here because here's a treasurer, Tyler Whitney. It's another name. If you look down through, this is their expenses. Amagi Strategies made $73,000. Tyler Whitney paid himself $12,500. This DB Capital Strategies, it comes up periodically, paid like $30,000 or $40,000 out of that pack. Well, Patriots for Economic Freedom, their directors were Tyler Whitney and Dan Backer. Tyler Whitney is Amagi Strategies. You know the little company that was paid by the PAC? $70-something thousand. That's his business. Kind of like Delgadio paid himself $100-some-odd thousand. Dan Backer is DB Capital Strategies. Now why do I bring up Dan Backer? Dan Backer, he owns TeaParty.net. Anybody ever heard of TeaParty.net or not heard of TeaParty.net? It's huge. These are all PACs that Dan Backer runs. These are all his. SOS, let's see, Stockman got money. And where I put special candidates, if you got a letter from TeaParty.net saying donate money to us because we're going to help out conservative candidates, and you gave money on your good faith, and you found out that they were giving money to Mitch McConnell and John Cornyn, would you be a little upset? Okay. Well, that happens regularly. Special Operations Speaks, he runs that PAC. They endorsed Steve Stockman the day after he got in the race, even without half of the membership in Texas knowing what they were doing. There's a reason for that. Dan Backer is Steve's current treasurer. This Tomorrow is Meaningful PAC. Special candidates, they're distributing $12,000, $15,000 a whack to people like Mitch McConnell and John Cornyn. Look at that and tell me how happy you are with that. $3.8 million in revenue, they get $58,000 to candidates. That's TeaParty.net. That's Tea Party. Tea Party. Don't tread on me, Tea Party. We're the principals. These are things you will not know if you're sitting at home and you're working for a living and you're going and doing your thing. If you're raising your family, you're never going to know these things. DB Capital Strategies paid himself $131,000 in defense of free speech. TeaParty.net gave $40,000 to defense of free speech. You see that JFC? That means Joint Fundraising Committee. These PACs all have them. Anybody can be on those committees. Well, the way this works, says in defense of free speech, they turned around and took that money and they dispersed $13,450 to Mitch McConnell, John Cornyn. Now, why does this all mean something? Well, Citizens United in Montana, what came out of Montana, that was a 100-year-old law that they sued against in Montana that said corporations couldn't participate in the election process. 100-year-old law in Montana. Everything was working just fine. It was a conservative lawyer that sued. He'll sit there right now and say he's conservative, and yeah, corporations, that is free speech. If you have $1 billion and you want to spend it on a candidate, that's your free speech. If you have a corporation that does not vote, it's taking money and making profit off of people that won't necessarily agree with you, and you're going to go spend that money behind closed doors to help a candidate that helps your industry? Nah, I don't think so. But these folks, Citizens United, when the Supreme Court ruled that you have this corporate status that can be treated as individuals, who sets the rules for the PACs that came out of that ruling? They designed these PACs. Who writes the rules? Congress. Congress writes the rules. So you've got all these C4s, these political issue-oriented nonprofits. You got PACs, super PACs, leadership PACs. All these are designed to create these pools of money politically. Leadership PACs. Vast majority of everybody in the Congress have a leadership PAC. They write their rules, right? Well, one little rule is really nice in the Congress. That is, any excess monies left in your leadership PAC can follow you when you leave office. Nice, huh? So, and I say it plainly because I believe this, you're going to rob and plunder Texans to pay yourself $170,000 for what we call public service. And then you're going to turn around and rob and plunder Texans, many of which can't afford to save or create a pension or retirement fund to give yourself the nicest retirement fund on the planet. And that's not good enough. We're going to keep shuffling money around through this political process to get it into our second pension, which is our leadership fund, our leadership PAC. And then the rules to carry that money forward out of your office are so lame that the rule of thumb is they generally just employ family members, and they've got to do it because they've got to stay in contact with the constituents that had put them in office originally. So it's pretty evil. What this all comes down to is everybody sees it. It's all about money. And they know how each one of us thinks. So when you get a letter that says, fight against the homosexual agenda, they're going to come take your guns, donate money, help us fight off whatever. They know us. Whatever you're doing on social media, whatever you're responding to in your surveys, whatever you're answering questions on and mailing back, they know who we are. And they push that button perpetually. This group represents me. I'm giving money to these people. Well, Center for the American Future, Jason Posey. That's a C4. What's special about that? Well, they were behind putting out these mailers that came out, which GOP candidates for you, and everything's all pro Steve Stockman, anti John Cornyn. Nothing's too specific about that, right? The only problem is Dan Backer's Steve Stockman's campaign manager. Donnie Ferguson was his campaign manager and social media advisor. Eugene Delgadio, he put out the survey distribution and fundraising and did a lot of the mailers. And Jason Posey, who I just listed, he's Steve Stockman's old treasurer, and that C4 he runs, People for, what was the last one? Center for American Future. That one, Center for the American Future, Jason Posey. Okay, he left Steve middle of last year, started that. Well, this is where it gets illegal in our eyes. An investigative journalist who was working on this had a guy in New Jersey call him and say, hey, look, you know they use WordPress as their home for their website. Well, he went into WordPress's index and was looking at the publicly accessed pages for the website. Well, amazingly, there was a page on there that had a complete listing of all the donors to the Steve Stockman for Senate 2014 campaign. Well, that's a C4, nonprofit. It's a little bit illegal for nonprofits to collude with candidates during the election cycle, much less any other time. So my campaign manager, Brett Rogers, who is an IT guy by training, went straight to the website, pulled all the data, and we formulated that all up. And when I say he pulled the data, it was their names, their home addresses, their credit card information, how much they donated. It was publicly accessed. Totally out there for anybody and everybody. So we submitted 2 claims to the FEC, and they're under review right now. But yeah, it's pretty bad. This is, and when I say what have we learned, I'm going to tell you what I learned. Everybody's got a group that they like, they support, they believe in them. That's fine. I'm not here to knock anything that you believe in your heart you believe to be true. I'm telling you personally, after what I've seen, and this is just a piece of it, I don't give money to anybody outside the state of Texas. I don't care who they are. I just don't care who they are. I don't care how big an advertising scheme they've got. I don't give money to outside the state of Texas. Second thing, I will never give money in an election to to anybody but the candidate. If there's somebody I like, I'm going to give money directly to them. The groups involved in politics that you want to support, my suggestion, this is my own litmus test. If I can't walk in the door of their establishment, shake hands with the person that's taking the money and see the results of that money, they don't get it. I don't respond to anything in the mail. I don't send off to people who write, because they're taking our ideals and our morals and principles and they're using them against us. And it has nothing to do with governance. Zero. It has everything to do with padding their pockets. That's it. It's just a money-making scheme. And when we all ask each other, good Lord, why would they spend $800,000 to get a $7,200 a year job in Austin? Well, ask yourself, how would they spend $20 million to get a $176,000 a year job in? You'd be better off just to take the $20 million and go home, right? There's something to that. Now that I've said all this, I'll turn right around and tell you, we've got to raise money. I'm not giving any money to anybody outside the state of Texas. And I used to think I could donate to people who were working for conservative causes or whatever. I'm so over that now. I'm not knocking everybody. There's a few groups here in Texas they house here in Texas. They have offices. You can go talk to them. You can see the results of what they're doing. Those I'm totally for. I'm leaning even more close to home though. I live in Liberty County. If I can't find some group in Liberty County that's doing the things that I want to do, then I'll give it to my church. I would rather donate locally or donate to local candidates or whatever than get involved in anything that's outside the state or primarily outside of my county. But it changes your thinking process when you see how much of this money's flying around and it's not being used. I mean, look at teaparty.net. My Lord, $3.8 million, and they gave $58,000 to candidates. And guess who that went to? Candidates like Mitch McConnell and John Cornyn. That's so Tea Party. Says Mitch McConnell, we're going to destroy the Tea Party. So that's where we're at. It's an ugly situation, but I think knowledge is the key here, and I think most people don't realize that this is going on. Even though we all walk around and say, money's just eating politics up. I did. When they started bringing this stuff to me, and that's just a piece of it. If you go to opensecrets.org, anybody who's never been there before, you can go there, type in any name of any PAC or congressman or member of Congress, and you can see all kinds of affiliations they're connected to and where their money comes from. It's insidious. It's the most evil thing you ever saw. It has nothing to do with public service. So I am on a rampage to get across Texas and get Texas to be the least donating state to anybody outside the state of Texas and any other country. I mean, any other state. But other than that, I really think we can do this. And I really am raising money to try and get around the state. It is expensive as all get out. This is our 10th one, I think. And I had no idea that people would be calling ahead so far. We're booked into August now. And my wife said, I thought this campaign was over. I said, it is, but this is more fulfilling. I get to express some things I learned. Any questions?
All right, Patty, got any questions?
Do we have any more cards? Is nullification, sorry. Am I on? Is nullification
A reasonable tactic for the states to use to fight back against the federal government. Do you think we need campaign finance reform?
Yeah, I think everybody knows we need campaign finance reform. We need to do away with Citizens United and PACs and all that kind of stuff. I don't care how much money people give to candidates. Some people the candidates have to be transparent. But the way the system is built, a C4 can take unlimited dollars from anybody and doesn't have to tell you who their money is. And they can stay 1 degree away from a candidate, and they can work on behalf of that candidate as long as they don't use 8 words. Literally 8 words. They can make I call them campaign commercials, and as long as they don't use one of these 8 words, they're considered issue-oriented political nonprofits, but they're blasting candidates. I mean, it's incredible. Nullification. in the original context, in the late 18th, early 19th century, late 17th, early 18th century, that's right, early 19th century. The idea was that back then the government was so small, the new government was so small, that nullification took under the immediate overtone was, we're not going to do what you said because you don't have the authority to do so, and if you don't like it, we'll get our militia together and we'll kick your tail. You know, there'd be a military conflict if they wanted to. If they wanted to nullify it and the federal government didn't like it, they'd just fight them. I don't think you're going to get that now. The back end of that is, I don't think you'd ever have to. I think you could use nullification the way we use it today, meaning just not participate, not do it, don't recognize it. I think that's the best way to go at it. But when I say don't participate, y'all heard me earlier, you don't participate. You tell them that all of their arguments stop at the Red River and we're not even going to pick up the phone. And if you think you want to enforce it, come enforce it. Scale. There's not enough federal agents on the planet to come to Texas and enforce a single law, much less try to manage everything they're doing around the globe. So I think nullification is a great idea in today's context.
Who will you vote for in November for the U.S. Senate?
Still looking. I'm still looking. I haven't researched the Libertarian candidate. It's either a Democrat or somebody else.
Do I have any more cards? Ernie?
Okay, let's give,
Thank you all very much.